Steve I's aunt. If you've been watching our previous shows, you know that we're in Argentina and that we've been visiting a number of towns. We've been to Buenos Aires, Cordova, Mendoza. Yesterday was a travel day for us. We flew on a plane about 3 hours. We're now roughly 1,500 miles south of Buenos Aires. So George, my traveling companion George Schmelzer, we're 1,500 miles south. We're getting close to that little pointy part of South America and Argentina.
We're in El Calafate, which is, maybe 100 kilometers north of Puerto Natales, and then the next inhabited town south in Argentina is Ushuaia, and that's the end of the continent. I don't think you can go any farther south and still be in Argentina and in South America. So we're pretty close to the tip.
And if you've heard about sailors going around through Cape Horn and some of the terrible storms that they had to endure, some of those early explorers, we're getting close to Cape Horn. But the weather today in El Calafate is beautiful. We've had a chance to walk the town. And George, what are your impressions of this town so far?
Well, it surprised me a little bit. It's a lot like a ski resort in the Colorado or Utah. Now, the downtown pretty much devoted to backpackers and trekkers and hikers, adventure travelers, I guess, with stores of all kinds, restaurants, coffee shops, and that's about it, actually. You don't know where the local people must shop. I'm sure they've bought all of the hiking gear they could possibly want. But it's like Park City or something like that.
We'll show you some scenes of El Calafate. It is very desert-like, although it has some pretty high mountains around it. El Calafate itself is a bush, right?
It is. I think it's a kind of fruit, actually, that they make a liquor or jelly from, or at least that's the theory. That's what I read in Lonely Planet and a couple other places.
We haven't had a chance yet to try it out. We've seen it in bottles in stores, but
right. It
may be one of those sweet liqueurs, so not sure that that's something that we really want to try.
And not to my taste, but we'll see.
We did experiment, of course, as if you were watching those prior programs, with wine up in the Mendoza region, the Malbecs, Syrahs, Cabernet Sauvignons, but down here they're famous for their El Calafate berry, I think.
I think so, that and the local beer.
So we're going to be doing a couple things coming up on the show. The first is that one of the things that we've been surprised to find is that there's a very typical Argentine breakfast for travelers. It doesn't matter whether, George, whether it's been in Buenos Aires or Cordova or Mendoza or now Calafate, it's virtually the same breakfast.
It sure is. It's some cereal, a little bit of fruit, sliced ham, sliced cheese, croissant, I think they call it Luna y Media. It's shaped like the moon, and jelly and butter, coffee, maybe tea, and some fruit juice. And that hasn't varied across Argentina. It's pretty tasty, actually.
It's good. Makes me worry though whether they might get it all from the same place, and they just
could very well.
They just ship it out to all the various hotels.
Could
but
very well.
If you think about it, if you do some traveling and you go to a Holiday Inn or a Marriott or something, the American breakfasts, we Americans don't think about it. It's just what we're used to. And
not a lot different either. Maybe a few more cereals. But pretty much the same continental breakfast, and certainly adequate. Apparently Argentinians aren't big on big breakfasts like many of us are in the U.S.
Well, they have that small breakfast, and of course then they don't have lunch until around 2, and we keep having to remind ourselves that if you go to dinner at 9 o'clock, you're going early. That's kind of the early special.
That's right. It begins at 9 or later, and as we found in Mendoza, the wine tasting party closed at 2 o'clock in the morning. This was on a weeknight, so they do operate on a slightly different schedule, and it's fun being on it for a little while.
We don't know, of course, if they go to work at 8 o'clock the next morning or whether they start a little bit later, but very much in the Mediterranean tradition and in Mexico, most places close at 1 o'clock and reopen again at 5 in the afternoon. So
right.
We're not sure where they go or what they do, but the streets are deserted except for us tourists who are still wandering around, pounding on doors, trying to get in, but there's no one there. So.
Right, very often you just can't make it, right?
You can't do that. So anyway, coming up in our next segment, what a typical Argentine breakfast looks like in El Calafate. We're filming this on the steps of our, how do you pronounce it, hostel?
Hostel is what they call it, or hosteria, I think. But it's like a small hotel. I think there aren't more than 14, 16 rooms. Very comfortable, and last night was very pleasant. It was warm and a nice cozy feeling to the place.
So you mentioned something in reference to the weather. Up in Buenos Aires, this is their summertime. So we saw temperatures in the high 80s and the low 90s, and close to that in Cordova. In Mendoza, it got a little drier and a little cooler, but not by much. Temperatures are in the mid-70s. Here we've seen temperatures, what, high 40s, low 50s?
Yes, and I think as we head off to do our trekking later and visit the glacier at Glacier Moreno tomorrow, I think we're going to find that it'll be a good deal colder.
We're going to dress warmly, including some long johns. So if you're going to go out on a glacier, you need to be prepared for it. So we're coming up next, breakfast segment, and then after that, the glacier tour. So please stay with us.
Well, it's the following morning, and we're looking at a typical Argentine breakfast. On the left-hand side, you see some bowls of cereal that you can spoon into the small bowls behind. There's always a bowl of fruit. Sometimes it's cut fruit, such as watermelon or honeydew. In this case, though, it's a mixture. And then bread, and to the right, and that's our server coming in to put some additional new things down. We've got some new orange juice. There's some croissants in the back. A little plate of some cheese slices and ham slices. And then to the right there, we've got coffee and tea and some warm milk. Some tea in the back. So this is a typical breakfast. We've run into this almost exactly the same in Buenos Aires, Cordova, Mendoza, and now the city of El Calafate. So we're getting ready to go to the Perito Moreno Glacier. We're looking forward to it, and that's what you're going to see in the next segment. So please stay with us.
Very calm. So whenever we have the best view of the Andes and the lake, we will stop for pictures. That's going to be the first stop. After that, we're going to continue until we arrive to the National Park entrance. At the National Park entrance, remember that you have to pay the National Park tickets. Sí. Yes. Remember when you have to pay 100 pesos per person that you have to pay at the entrance to the National Park? I have your... after that, we will continue, and we're going to have the first views of the glacier. We will stop for a faraway view, and then finally at the end of the road we have the final viewpoints. In that area, it's what we call balconies. Viewpoint area is where you're going to have free time. We are not going to walk together.
The bus is taking a short stop. We're on our way to the Perito Moreno Glacier. As you can see, this is a beautiful but very stark land. There's not a lot of vegetation. We're told that sheep farming is the main activity around here, but the land is very poor, and so there are thousands of hectares. That's what they measure by instead of acres. Thousands of hectares that the sheep have to graduate or graze on. So we're on our way to Perito Moreno, the glacier. We should be there in about another 45 minutes. It's about an hour and a half outside of the city of El Calafate. We are almost to the glacier. I'm here with our tour guide, Mariana. Mariana,
hello,
good morning.
hi,
Good morning.
thank you.
And she speaks English better than I speak. So
no.
What I'm going to ask her, though, is to give us some statistics about this glacier. How big is it? How wide? So if you can tell us some of those basic facts.
Perfect. This is Perito Moreno, the glacier we have behind us. This is 257 square kilometers, which is bigger than Buenos Aires city. And then this glacier is 30 kilometers long from the back to the ice field to the lake. The total front we can see later is 5 kilometers wide, and the height is between 40 and 60 meters, but under the water it's another 100 meters.
So if we can do some rough translations, 100 meters is about 300 feet then?
Yes.
Because our viewers will understand more of the
yes,
feet. And
yes.
so if it is 60 meters high,
Yes.
50 meters, then roughly
100...
60 times, let's see, 6 times 60 is 360 feet high, and you said like a 15-story building.
15 stories building,
So
yes.
15 stories high, so you can see this is a very big glacier. It was and 5 meters wide, you said?
Wide. Here we can see shows 1 kilometer, but then in total it's 5 kilometers wide.
5 kilometers, okay, so about 3 miles then. So we're going to get closer to that glacier. We're also going to take a bus, not a bus tour, a boat tour.
Yeah, tour boat.
A tour boat, so we'll get up right up close. So please stay with us because we have more on the glacier coming up.
Well, we are down now on the pier. We're going on board this catamaran. A catamaran is a boat that has 2 hulls. It's a very high catamaran, I think probably to avoid the small pieces of ice or literally mini icebergs that break off. So let's go on board and see how close we get to this beautiful glacier. Well, we're pretty close now to the Perito Moreno ice flow glacier, as they call it. It's hard to believe that what we're looking at is 15 stories high and below the water line, about 300 feet below the water. We're going to see in just a moment that this glacier, which moves about 3 feet a day toward us and then breaks off into the water, it's totally closed the gap. And when I say by the gap, what you see in front of us, normally that's open to the lake beyond, but it's not. But it's starting to break down. You can see a little bit of a cave up there. We're going to break just a second and see if we can get a close-up of that cave. Now, directly in front of us is what people would call an iceberg. That's a piece of the ice that has broken off, and it's just floating there in the water. So we're getting pretty close. We're going to turn a little bit to the port side, as they say in nautical terms, but that's an iceberg directly ahead, and like the Titanic, we don't want to be like the Titanic, I should say. We're going to avoid that iceberg. There's also some smaller icebergs in the water there that have gradually melted. So that cave that you see there, that's the beginning of the collapse of that portion of this glacier. Normally there's free water, that is from where we are right now to the lake on the other side, but the glacier has moved so far that it's totally closed it off. This glacier moves at about 1 meter a day, which is about 3 feet. So it's going to take another 6 months or so, but gradually that's going to collapse. We're now off the boat and we are up on a point of land overlooking the Perito Moreno Glacier. Just going to do a slow pan so you can see the drama. Again, what you see in front of you is some 15 stories high and 100 meters or about 300 feet of ice below the water. Occasionally you will hear some ice begin to fall, and what we hope we see, but we have not seen yet so far, is a big chunk of that ice breaking off and falling into the water, such as, looking down in the water, you see some ice floating. That's broken off at this glacier. It's called calving, but we haven't seen it yet. We're going to go down and take a closer look. Please stay with us.
I didn't know it was called calving.
It's called calving. As you can see, this is quite a big lake that the glacier dumps out into. Our tour guide told us it's actually the 3rd largest lake in South America. I'm not sure how it compares to any of the lakes that are up around the Michigan-Wisconsin area known as the Great Lakes, but this is a big lake. It actually starts out by El Calafate, which is an hour-and-a-half drive away, and continues to where you see it, and now we're slowly going to pan over to the glacier itself. just to show you the perspective. So we can hear the sound of running water, but we can't see it. It must be inside the glacier eating away, and that's what eventually causes some of those pieces of ice to fall off and into the water. Others, I think, just as the glacier moves forward 3 feet every day towards where we're standing, eventually it's undermined by the water and just falls off into the water. Well, that concludes our trip to the glacier at Perito Moreno. We've had a great time. Hope you've enjoyed it as much as we have. Coming up next, we've talked about the town of El Calafate, but you haven't really seen what it looks like. If you've ever been to Finland or the South Island in New Zealand or maybe even Alaska, it looks sort of like that. Not a lot of trees. So coming up next, a little quick view of the mountains and the suburbs of El Calafate. Please stay with us. Well, I hope you enjoyed your visit to the El Perito Moreno Glacier as much as I did. We've been talking about the town of El Calafate for a while, and you haven't really seen what it looks like. So here's just a quick scan of the surrounding area, and as you can see, it looks like somewhere that you might think might be in Alaska or Finland. It's very stark, no trees to speak of. Not a lot of people live in this town. We can hear a dog in the background. There's a lot of dogs here on a per capita basis. There may be more dogs wandering around than there are in Buenos Aires, which is a much bigger city. But they look well fed, so we think they're okay. So this is the suburbs of El Calafate. Downtown is just behind us, but it's not very big. It's only one street about 4 blocks long. Pretty stark, but beautiful place. Well, that completes our visit to El Calafate. George, I think we've had a great time today. We went out to the glacier.
We did. It wasn't a long bus ride at all, about an hour and a half. Got to take a boat ride out to the base of the glacier, which I didn't expect. Probably an hour we were out on the water, 45 minutes anyway. And then what? Another 20-minute drive and we were at the glacier itself.
Exactly. So we had a great time there at the glacier. This has been a wonderful small city, but our wives are returning to the States tomorrow, and George and I are going to start on our trek. So George, tell us a little bit about what's going to happen to us tomorrow.
Well, I think that's when the party starts, no question about that. We'll be meeting some people at the airport. No, I'm just kidding. We head up to El Chalten, which is north of here, about a 2-hour bus ride. And that's where the famous peak Fitzroy is, and we'll spend a day there, do some hiking up in that area for a couple of days before returning again here to El Calafate.
And after that, we're going to head south for some serious trekking in Patagonia. We're actually in Patagonia now, but we're going to be really in Patagonia in a few days. So that's all from El Calafate. Please stay with us, though, for that next segment when George and I finally start on our trek. We've been hiking for several hours now. What you see before you is the Rio Fitzroy, or the Fitzroy River. The trail that we're on leads to the base of Fitzroy, which is, as we mentioned before, some 10,000 feet high?
11.
About 11,000 feet high. It's been shrouded in clouds, so we hope to get a view of it before we leave to our next destination. But just wanted to show you this great valley with the Rio Fitzroy running through it. Well, we have one more chance to take a look at the river valley that we just showed you a few moments ago. We do have to make one correction, though. This is not the Rio Fitzroy. It is the Rio de las Vueltas, which is one valley over from Rio Fitzroy. But it's a beautiful valley. We're on our way down now. We've had about 4 hours of hiking up and back. Not too much elevation change, but just a good way to sort of get ourselves limbered up for some of the big trekking that we have to do yet in Patagonia. Well, this is our first morning in El Chalten, and we're about to take our first hike. Kind of limber up the old legs to get us ready for the big one. So this is the town. We're right here. We're going to follow this trail all the way up here to Point de Set. It's roughly about 9 kilometers or about 6 miles. That doesn't sound like a lot, but when you have to go up a little and down a little and then over some logs and over some streams, this time can add up. It's going to take us probably about 3.5 to 4 hours to do that, and then another 4 hours to come back. Meanwhile, if I'll get my friend George to just pan a little bit to the right, you'll see that there are a number of things that they want to warn you about in the park. If you have to go to the bathroom, they want you to be at least 100 meters away from any stream. You can't do any campfires. You should carry out certainly all your trash. You need to be very concerned about how weather may change quickly. You certainly can't smoke. There's a fire danger here. So there's a number of things, and these signs are both in English and Spanish, since there are a number of international hikers that come to this area. So this is our first hike. We're going to have a good time. We've bought a sandwich early this morning. We have some water, so we're ready to go.
We've finished up our hike up to the base of Mount Fitzroy. The rangers told us to expect about 3 hours up, 3 hours back. We actually did it in about 5 hours. Spent an hour up at the base of Fitzroy watching somebody try to clamber up the last 400 meters. We don't know if they made it or not. We just couldn't see them, but it took more than just walking, so we decided we weren't going to try that today. The walk down was quick, took a little turn differently, went past the beautiful Lake Capri, ended up back on the main trail, and we're down here now at the very north end of the town of Chalton, and we're heading back to our hotel after a really nice day out on the trail.
This is Mount Fitzroy in El Chalaten. It's about 11,000 feet high. That doesn't make it the tallest mountain in the Andes or even in North America. But what makes it so challenging, as you can see, is it's almost straight up and down. It's solid rock. That means there's no trail up there. If you want to climb El Chalaten, you have to use climbing equipment. Axes, hammers, pitons, nylon ropes to haul yourself up there. Fitzroy is named after the captain of the Beagle. The Beagle was a ship that sailed through Cape Horn around South America around 1830, 1840. Its most famous passenger was Charles Darwin. Charles Darwin, of course, wrote a number of books and is the father of the theory of evolution. We're filming this late at night because it was been covered by clouds all during the day.
We're here today in El Chalaten. Yesterday was a travel day. You can see behind us Mount Fitzroy. El Chalaten is a small town. It only has 600 people, and that's during the summer season. There's no cell phone service. There's no bank. There's no ATM. A few of the stores take credit cards, but they'll give you a 10% discount if you pay in cash. We've had a quick walk through the city. Pizza seems to be the national food. If you don't like pizza, you should not come to El Chalaten. Hiking though is really good, very good I should say. Mount Fitzroy behind us. Mount Fitzroy is named after Captain Fitzroy, who was captain of the Beagle. The Beagle was a British sailing ship that came around the Horn in 1834. Its most famous passenger was Charles Darwin. At this point, he had not fully formulated his theory of evolution. Once they sailed further north to the Galapagos Islands, it then came into focus. But he wrote Origin on the Species, and they actually did come up this far. Mount Fitzroy is only about 11,000 feet high. It's not one of the highest mountains in the Andes, but it is one of the most difficult to scale. As a matter of fact, it was not scaled until 1958. You can't walk up there. You have to use ropes, pitons, axes, and haul yourself up. So it is not an easy mountain to climb. Are we going to do it? Probably not. Anyway, we're in El Chalaten. We're going to take several day hikes as a warm-up for our big trek in Patagonia. That's still coming up. That concludes our trek down in Patagonia, Parque Nacional. We've done 2 shows. This was the second show. The first one, if you didn't have a chance to see it, It's on YouTube. Let's wrap this one up. Let's share with our folks what they've already seen, but some of our observations about our trek and the people that we met.
Well, it's just a great hike, and you know, the, if you will, outdoor side of it. The natural history is just profoundly beautiful. The glaciers are wonderful to watch, and they seem almost alive. The mountains are fantastic. But along the trail, one of the most interesting parts is the opportunity to meet people from all over the world. And sitting around at dinner at night, of course, everybody gets a chance, which is what hikers love to do, is to tell other hikers about their last adventures. They normally add 1,000 meters to the highest point they reached on their last hike, and they generally add several miles to the longest distance they rode. But who knows, you know, everybody's equal around the table, and it's great to hear some of the adventures that people have gone through. We're fortunate, speaking English, so many other people have mastered English, at least enough to describe what they're up to and where they're going, and we're the beneficiaries of that. It's a shame we don't all speak more foreign languages, but as it is, it works out great for us, and I enjoyed every minute of it, and pretty much liked everybody I met along the trail.
George, considering how far we are away from all these other countries, down almost to Antarctica, how many different nationalities did we run into? Can we name all the different countries that we ran into?
Certainly Brits and Canadians and French, Italian, Austrians, German, Chinese. Japanese fella got stepped on by a horse. We saw that. So that's 8 right off, and I'm sure there are, a Brazilian fella that we met several times along the trail. Plus all of the South American countries, which were predominant Argentinians and Chileans. So that's 10 easily, and there were probably a lot more.
So a real international melting pot here down on the tip of South America. So that concludes our show. You may be thinking, well, gosh, I'm never going to get to Patagonia, but I'd like to do something like that. If you've not hiked the Appalachian Trail, it's right in your own backyard. All you need to do is just Google it, put in Appalachian Trail. You don't have to go for a week at a time. There's a number of day hikes. It's really probably only just a couple of hours drive from where you're located right now. And it's a beautiful trail, especially if you take it in the fall or in the spring. Summer's pretty nice as well. So something you should think about. We want to thank you for watching. I'm Steve Izant with my trekking partner and friend George Schmelzer. And we're out.